seats in case someone comes in. I'm going to introduce, I think all of you have a page showing who the panel is that right? If not,
Yes.
they're over there. You can get one of the panelists. Okay. I want to first thank and acknowledge Tisch Marty, who's over there, who is one of the other parent organizers. I also want to acknowledge Lisa Saramsak and Lynn Cadwallader, both of whom were part of this small group of parents who decided to have this gap year panel and work together on making it happen. The reality is we thought about this last fall, and then we thought about it again in December. We're all parents of seniors, and then we thought about it again in January. We'll do it in January after the applications are done. And then all of a sudden it was February, and we said we better do it soon. So we also worked with the guidance department, who is supportive of this and has not really done a comprehensive effort around gap year. So that's part of the genesis of us wanting to do it. I had asked at a couple of venues what their advice was on gap years, and they really didn't have very many. And they have said they have had events during the day on individual programs for students, but they've never really had a gathering like this to talk about gap years. So we wanted to show the way. And I want to first introduce the panel and not say a lot about them, but let you know who's going to be speaking with you. Stace Lindsey is the parent of a graduate and also a current junior. The graduate took a gap year, and Stace is now president of the board of a organization called Global Citizen Year, which provides gap/bridge years. Ina Shkruti, is that how you pronounce your name? Oops. Okay, graduated from the O'Brien School in Boston, which is where my niece goes now, a fabulous school, and decided to take a year through Global Citizen Year and spent the year in Ecuador and is now at U.Mass Lowell. Maya Ludtke, probably everyone in the room knows, because she is a current senior at CRLS who is already decided that she's doing a gap year and has been accepted into an organization that is apparently now as difficult to get into as any of the most competitive colleges in the country, which is City Year. Alan Solomont, who is either Alan or His Excellency, right, from former ambassador, and is Dean of the College of Public Service.
Citizenship and Public Service
at Tufts University, and it's very exciting when we all heard, many of us heard on NPR 6 weeks ago, when there was a buzz in the world of those people thinking about years of service after or between high school and college, that Tufts was consciously starting a program called 1+4, and the snippet I remember about it, Alan will tell you more about it, is the fact that they will help fund low-income students who have been accepted to their school in order to do their gap year, which is an amazing gift, I think, because so many people feel like they can't afford to do a gap year. Bob Gilpin is someone who spent 25 years or so teaching at Milton Academy and a number of other places, and wrote a book about a gap year and has been serving as an educational consultant for many, many years. And when I approached him, he volunteered to do this, and it was just very nice because he, I think, provides a perspective of a range of programs that none of us have. And he also provided just a 2-page tip sheet, which is somewhere over there. And Karen Chen is a graduate, very recent graduate. Probably all of you in the room know her as well. Karen graduated from CRLS in 2013, and I don't even know the entirety of her gap year, but she's doing it now and will be at NYU in the fall. And Ariane Berelowicz is going to be coming here. She graduated in 2010 and decided to take a gap year. She is now a junior or senior at Harvard University. So I just want to say a couple years about me, because I'm also having a couple minutes.
Well, that's a long round,
About my many, many years ago, I actually did a gap year, long before I was even called a gap year. I was an exchange student through AFS in 1975. And the unfortunate thing is I have no idea what led me to it. I don't even remember how it is that I took the courage.
What is AFS?
AFS stands for American Field Service, which was one of the first organizations to have a broad range of exchange programs that provide either summer experiences or half-year or year-long experiences. Most students did it during their junior year of high school or senior year of high school. I didn't want to miss out on my senior year of high school, so I chose to do it afterwards. And I will say, which I'm glad my son has finished his college applications, because I took the approach that as soon as I heard I was into AFS, I said, oh good, now I don't have to apply to college until I go overseas, which is probably not recommended. So I don't actually remember what led me to it, but it changed my life in the most positive way that I could imagine. It exposed me to another country. I was in Brussels in Belgium, and even though it's Western Europe, it's about as close in some ways to the level of living we have. It was a completely different culture. It made me as an American live something very different. I lived with a family that I'm still close to and communicate with and go on vacations with. And it also prepared me, I think, for college. I didn't know, but probably the reason I applied was I really didn't know if I was going to be ready for college. And I think for me, I ended up down the street at Harvard. I would not have been as successful in college if I hadn't taken that year to mature and to grow and to develop and to really experience a little bit of independence. I was living in the context of a family and in essence repeating the last year of high school, but it was still different enough that I had to develop and grow myself as a person. So the last thing I'll say is when we thought of this panel, it was interesting how we could think of, a few of us were saying, oh, I know someone who did this, I know someone who did that. There's lots of students around CRLS who have done this, and yet there's not actually a comprehensive way for students here to find out who are they, what did they do, and I'm not even sure the school knows how many kids have taken gap years over the years.
I'm sure they don't.
So, what?
I'm sure they don't.
I'm sure they don't, right. Well, so part of what we want to do is present this to the community, show there's interest, and then start to build that resource base for all of us, all of our kids, and all future kids. So with that, I will stop, and there's an order that we just decided on, and I think Alan will go next.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing, sorry. We'll all talk, and then we'll have Q&A for everybody. We will be done by 8, so there'll be plenty of time for Q&A afterwards, but I think we should let everybody get through their remarks before we...
You want me to finish by 8?
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
Ariane, right? Yeah, Ariane, the aforementioned,
I'll put your
just coming from her class.
Polydol for 19 at Gmail.
First of all, thanks to Patty and thanks to all of you for inviting us to talk about what we're doing at Tufts. It's a very exciting new program. I was particularly interested in coming, one, to share what we're doing, but also because I've been wanting to meet Bob and I've been wanting to meet Stace, because I had heard about both of them as experts in this arena, so that's a nice connection. I'm here with a colleague of mine. I'm really just a pretty face, but Mindy Nierenberg is my colleague at the Tisch College, the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Citizenship and Public Service at Tufts University. And Mindy is really the person who's putting this program together. And actually will be sending out a request for proposal to service sites on Monday, and has been working tirelessly on this. So Tufts University has always prided itself in graduating students who go out into the world and become what we call active citizens, who go into government or politics or become social entrepreneurs or whatever they do, live a life that is civically engaged and participate in their communities, in their nation, and in the world. And 15 years ago, the university decided to institutionalize this, and to the extent that this is part of Tufts' DNA, then the Tisch College is the repository of the genes. And we work across the university. We don't have our own faculty or we don't give our own degrees, but we work with the medical school, the vet school, arts and sciences, Fletcher Engineering, to ensure that everyone who gets a Tufts education is educated to be an active citizen and is prepared for a lifetime of civic engagement. And this summer, as a result of attending the Aspen Institute Ideas Festival, at which the Franklin Project was launched, our provost, David Harris, came back with the idea to create something called the 1+4 Bridge Year program, and very consciously refer to it as a bridge, not a gap, because language is important. Beginning next year, when we admit the freshmen who will begin their Tufts experience in the fall of 2015, we will give admitted freshmen, the opportunity to take a year to do full-time community service, either in the United States or overseas, prior to beginning their academic experience, or their formal academic experience. These will be admitted Tufts students. And to the extent that there is this thing called gap years, we differentiate ourselves in that one is we wanted to democratize the experience. We recognize that most young people who get to do this are able to do it because their families can afford it, and we wanted to, so we will support students who need financial support in order to do this. Secondly, most of these programs tend to focus more on the international experience, and we will work also to create opportunities for for service within the United States. And thirdly, we hope to integrate it with the academic experience in some ways. We will bring this group, we will start by admitting 50 students to this program in the fall of 2015, though we hope to grow it and would love it eventually to be like the Northeastern Co-op program, if I can say. You know, we will bring these folks to campus in the summer before and begin to develop leadership skills and civic skills and maintain contact with them during the year. We will probably send students in small groups of 4 to 7 to a specific service site. So they'll be with a small community of Tufts students, but with hopefully surrounded by a larger community of other participants in the service programs. But they will be maintain contact with faculty and with each other during the year, and then we'll come back to campus before they start their freshman courses or their first year courses for a period of reflection. We hope this group of students will come to campus to begin their formal studies somewhat more mature, somewhat better able to take advantage of this experience, with leadership skills and civic skills that they can put to work as part of the undergraduate community or part of the Tufts community. And we also hope that this will be one of a variety of what we call transformational experiences that our university provides, that this will transform these young people in ways that will really better prepare them both for their academic experience but also for a lifetime of good work and, or as somebody said, robust acts of citizenship. And so we've announced the program. We've gotten a lot of really good attention for it. Mostly, there's a slight distortion in a headline that caused us some grief, but it's been very gratifying. And we believe that this generation of young people that we are educating today have a deep desire to serve. I have a young recent graduate who's doing Teach for America in Denver, which I never expected, and she is having an incredible experience doing that, a very difficult one, but it's very inspiring. So we think this generation has a deep desire to serve. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves, and they want to find practical solutions to the problems. And we also believe that this is probably a moment in time, both in this country and in the world, when we desperately need good citizens. We desperately need to repair our civic institutions and our government. And we need young people, who want to engage in their communities or who want to engage in solving problems in our country or in the world. And so we have said that we're not creating demand, we are satisfying an appetite. And it's very exciting. Now, we are working with existing service organizations. We haven't yet selected these, though we've gotten a very positive response from Global Citizen Year, from City Year, from Lyft, from a whole range of potential sites, and we'll be picking them this spring. So again, I'm really honored to be a part of this evening, and really so enthused that so many people are interested in this. And I guess we hope that one day this will be that, as General McChrystal, who's heading up the Franklin Project, believes, that either military service or civilian national service will be a rite of passage for all young Americans, and will do some of the things that other opportunities to serve have done for this generation and for this country and for this generation whom we think can be the next greatest generation. So, thank you.
That was so great. I was completely enamored by Tufts as a high school student.
I
And
brought some applications.
perfect. I'll send in another. I know, yeah. So I wish this program had been going when I was applying. I don't know if I could have handled that level of admiration for college. But I am a junior at Harvard right now, so very close by, and I can just speak a little bit to my experience in deciding to take a gap year and then what it was like to be on a gap year. Mine was very unstructured, which was sometimes very empowering and sometimes very scary. But I started off my senior year of high school very uncertain about college and very anxious about putting this financial burden on my family when I felt like I really didn't have a clear vision of what I was interested in studying or doing. And college had kind of been built up as these 4 amazing years that are extremely transformative, which is extremely intimidating, and I felt very pushed down this path and very scared of that, and had many arguments with my parents where I felt like I haven't had a chance to like stop and think about what I want to do, and I haven't had any time to pause my academics and reflect on them before I have to do something that is going to transform me into the person I'm supposedly going to be for a very long time to come. And my parents' response was, "You need to apply to college, please. Just apply to college. You need to do this." And it was this strong butting of heads, and in the end, we had this compromise where I would apply to colleges, and then we'd have a conversation after my applications were in. So I did my college applications, although I was reluctant to complete them. And when I got my college letters back, I was accepted to Harvard, which was even more intimidating than just the prospect of college. And I just felt like I wasn't really ready and wanted to take some time. And my parents said, "Why don't we start exploring this idea of a gap year?" And I think at the time Harvard made it very easy. You could just click accept your admittance, deny your admittance, or take a gap year. And it was like a 1, 2, 3 button. I think colleges are making it very simple and facilitating that. So it was great to see that, and made my parents, I think, a lot more comfortable with the idea of me taking a gap year. And so I decided to take a year off, and the conversation with my parents was I would reassess how I felt going back to college, but still strong pushing me to college, and I was still very nervous and went on this year off. And I moved to Paris, France, where a lot of my family is from, and worked as a nanny there, and had a really challenging experience of living alone for the first time in a culture where I wasn't completely fluent in the language, and kind of figuring out what I wanted to do with very little guidance, and it was really hard, and I came back home after 4 months feeling even less certain about my abilities to leave home, and ended up staying in Cambridge for a little bit, and working and doing some service work, and working in a sandwich shop to kind of save up for my next project or plan, and ended up doing an outdoor educational experience through Knowles, which is really similar to Outward Bound. And that was a wonderful experience. I'm happy to go into more depth about that if anybody has questions about that specifically. But that was like a big turning point in my year off, where I felt like I had worked and saved up for this project and gone. I went to Mexico and sea kayaking, and they had this really enriching curriculum, and came back and felt really excited about going to college because I had spent a lot of time outside of academics and really missed it, and also had been confronted with a lot of situations where I was denied access because I didn't have a college degree, or kind of just found that I was excited to engage again with academics. So I think the biggest takeaway from my year off was that it was really hard and made me really, really want to go to college, which was a great feeling that I didn't have before. And it gave me like a more personal connection to why I was excited about learning and why I was excited about taking a major and living with peers who were studying similar things to me or very different things from me, and what that meant to be in this peer group and in an academic setting. So I'm very, very glad that I took a year off. And I sometimes wish that I'd had more structure, maybe university support. I I called Harvard University in October of my gap year saying, please let me come, I don't know what I'm doing here. And was very glad that I was pushed to kind of be on my own and make my own plan and have the experience of shaping my own future before going into an institution that really facilitates that in a specific way. So I don't know if we're doing questions or...
We'll do questions after.
Oh, great.
Thank you. Now for Tina, we're going from the person who graduated earliest to the person who's not graduated. So Ina.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ina. I go to U.Mass Lowell, and my gap year was in the Amazon of Ecuador with Global Citizenship. And let's see, how did I even think of taking a fridge year? So in high school, I'd done two things. Well, I'd done many things, but two things that stand out were my Outward Bound trip the summer after my sophomore year and my service trip to Nicaragua the summer after my junior year. And I'd come back to school after those trips, and it didn't feel right. I felt like I was missing something. I was missing something that I had in Maine when I was sailing and kayaking, and I was missing what I had when I was in Nicaragua. And I don't know what it was. I couldn't explain it to people. But somehow my mentors knew, and two of them who don't even know each other, they both told me about Global Citizenship. They're like, I think that you should look into it, and we see you. We know that maybe you need some time off. Maybe you need to go and learn something more. So I looked into Global Citizenship, and I also looked into the Outward Bound Gap Year program. I also looked into the Amigos Gap Year program, but eventually settled on Global Citizenship because it provided the structure that would make my mom feel a little bit more comfortable, and it gave me full immersion, so I was really excited about that. It gave me training. We have training seminars in California before we leave for our countries and after we come back from our countries. And we have a cohort, so there's a bunch of us going in 3 different countries, and then my favorite thing about Global Citizenship was the apprenticeship. So while I'd be in country, they would place me in an apprenticeship with professionals in that country from the field that I wanted to do, or maybe they felt I should be in. So my apprenticeship actually ended up being my favorite part of my time in Ecuador. I was working with the Ministry of the Environment and a German organization that they did a whole bunch of projects, including natural resource management and environmental awareness, and I got to work with indigenous communities in the Amazon and travel around, talk to people, feel them, and I don't know, I'm back now, and the way I see the world is different. I don't just see myself, I see the world, I see my studies, I see the direction that I'm taking, and I'm trying to be more intentional about the things that I do, and I don't think I could have had that without my gap year. So yeah.
Okay, I'm Karen. I graduated from Lindsey last year, and I'm currently taking a gap year, and I will be at NYU this fall. So I originally didn't plan on taking a gap year. My plan was always graduate high school, go to college, graduate college, and then figure it out from there. But after applying and hearing back from my colleges, the college that I wanted to go to most was NYU, which is a very expensive university. And I realized from talking to my friends and guidance counselors and teachers and whatever, that I had no idea what I wanted to study when I went to college. I knew I wanted to study something in liberal arts, but I didn't have like a plan of what I wanted to do in the future. So after thinking about it a lot, I decided I wouldn't want to spend a year in college where I just had no idea what I wanted to study, because of the fact that it's very expensive to go to college, and if I don't know what I'm doing, I shouldn't be wasting that time. So I decided to take a gap year, and my gap year right now is also very unstructured. In the beginning, when everyone was going to college, I was like, I'm not entirely sure what I'm doing right now. But I did a lot of volunteer work. My mother works for this Buddhist volunteer organization, so I've been working with them a lot since I started my gap year, which has been really enlightening to be able to like meet all these people and help a bunch of other people that I didn't get the chance to do when I was in high school because I was always busy with academics and extracurriculars and whatnot. And around October, my mother said, you know something that you should do? You should go back to Taiwan, because my mother is from Taiwan, and I have a lot of family there, and ever since high school, I haven't had the time to go back and visit and kind of reconnect with that culture. So I enrolled for this program, where it was a 6-week program in Taiwan, where I got to actually go to a university in Taiwan and study Chinese with a bunch of students, a bunch of Taiwanese students from around the world. So I went in the beginning of this year in January, and I actually met a lot of Taiwanese students from South American countries because it was their summer vacation. So I got to go there and improve my Chinese, which my mother was very thrilled about. It's been deteriorating a bit. But so I got to go back and basically immerse myself in like a Taiwanese culture for 6 weeks. But more than that, I also got to learn a lot about South American cultures, which is really interesting because I just hadn't met any South American Asians before. So the fact that there were a bunch of Asian people speaking Spanish really blew my mind. So I was there for 6 weeks, and I came back with a whole different perspective on not only like Taiwanese culture, because I hadn't been for so long, but also a culture from South America that I just hadn't experienced before. And now I'm back, and I'm just doing like volunteer work and seeing what I'm going to do next. So it's pretty unstructured, but I'm having a good time.
Hi everybody. My name is Ludtke.
Can everybody hear?
Yeah, so I'm a current senior here at CRLS, so it's great to see all of you here. And I will be taking a bridge year next year through City Year, and I'll be doing City Year Boston. So I guess to give you a little bit of background information on what City Year is, if you don't already know. So education it's important, and it's something that I think it's easy to overlook its importance. And City Year's mission is to go into the schools across the country that are failing. And we can see that those schools are very condensed in certain areas. So City Year's mission is to go into those schools and have students act as mentors and teachers for these kids, and hopefully, increase dropout rates and spark
Lessen dropout rate.
lessen dropout rates, and just inspire them to keep going in education, because I think especially in a school like this, where opportunity is just thrown at you from every direction, and I don't know which ones to grab onto. But for many students, that's not the case. Education is something that is truly a privilege, and these kids would do anything to go to school, and there's a lot more obstacles in their way. So the reason that I wanted to do City Year is to see the world through that lens, and hopefully, like Alan was saying, be someone who's going to reach out and make change. And I'm hoping, I don't really know because I haven't done it yet, but I'm definitely hoping that it will change me in some way, and help me grow as a student and as a person. Because I've always had a passion for service. I had this epiphany in like 5th grade when I met Jane Goodall, which is kind of on a different story, where I knew that I wanted to be someone who, you know, matters and does something. And when I heard about City Year, it was like, wow, this is perfect. It's a way for me to go out and help other students, but because of City Year's model, there would also be teachers and team leaders who would be helping me to develop myself. So City Year is, I mean, it is competitive, about 1 in 8 or 9 students, I believe. It's primarily college graduates, about 80%, and about 20% are high school graduates, like myself. There are locations across the U.S., and then there's 2 foreign sites. I think Boston is one of the larger headquarters for City Year.
Why did you decide to do it?
We're gonna hold questions.
I mean, I guess I will answer that. I decided it because, I mean, for one thing, I am kind of young for my grade, and like, I mean, just echoing what everyone else has been saying, it's a year to figure out what you want to do with yourself. And while I know I truly want to be an environmental science major, it's a huge field, and you can go into college not really knowing what you're going to do. And I think that through this year I can gain a lot of knowledge about the world and about myself, and hopefully kind of go into the year very strong and really take advantage of the opportunities. Yeah.
Okay, Stace, as a parent and program person.
I'm going to stand up so I can see you all. I'm Stace Lindsey. I am the father of Abby Lindsey, who's now a freshman in college at Georgetown University, and the father of Cameron Lindsey, who is a junior in high school. I'm also, as they said, chairman of the board of Global Citizen Year, which is the program that Ina went on and also that my daughter went on in Ecuador last year. So I wear a number of different hats. I was also before such a thing existed, a gap year kid. I also, in that day, it was also known as a college dropout. So I went
Words matter.
Words do matter. I grew up in Montana. I went to Montana State University, and after 2 quarters thought it was a complete waste of time and money. And so I dropped out and moved to the Dominican Republic and tried to make a difference there, speaking no Spanish and having no skills. And while I was there, the country ended up in a state of emergency, and there's massive crises, and lots of people were killed and injured, and I thought, wow, there's a lot going on in the world that I don't understand. And my message to the students is taking time off to hit the pause button and think about what bugs you? What doesn't make any sense? And go and spend time reflecting on that will help your college career tremendously. I ended up going to 3 colleges before I graduated. It took me a while to sort it out. But my experience in the Dominican Republic was a critical element of my winning a scholarship to Oxford University for graduate school, which set the stage for all of the work that I've done since, which is in international economic development and leadership. So that critical time to hit pause and think about, what do I really want to do with this time? This gift of 4 years of college is just invaluable. And so I'm a huge advocate as a former dropout of be more structured about it, think about it. As a parent, so a message for the parents is my wife also took 2 years off before going to college, and so for our kids, we'd really encourage all of them to take time off. We're not going to force them to take time off, but it's been so instrumental in our own understanding of who we are in the world that we really endorse it. Global Citizen Year was a program that we found that we love because there are some programs that it's sort of like high-end safaris for rich kids. Go in and then you do a week of work at the orphanage and you feel good about it. Global Citizen Year, as Ina said, is 8 months of immersion in a country where you don't necessarily have to speak the language, but you leave understanding the language. You didn't mention this, but you have homestay, you live with local families. We try to keep them so that there are 2 or 3 within a village, but not close enough that every day you can go find somebody and talk in English. So they're learning Spanish or Wolof in the case of Senegal, or Portuguese. And Global Citizen Year does 10 years of intensive training up front with world-class faculty on economics and politics and development, mindfulness. If you remember, we did the mindfulness curriculum. We really think hard about how to prepare these kids to go. And then we do a month of training in country, and then they go into the homestays, and at the homestay they have this apprenticeship. You did the one, my daughter, who's interested in kids with learning disabilities, ended up working at a local clinic with disabled children, getting more time in the clinic than she would have as a graduate student in any school here. It was an unbelievable experience for her. And then on the back end, we spent a week debriefing. Coming back after you're off is a little challenging because the rest of the world's been moving and you've been working at a different rhythm. But I'd say to the parents, it's hard to let go of your kids, but it's a big world, it's an exciting world, and the joy. I remember one Christmas Day, my daughter called on Skype and said, "There's no place I'd rather be." You know, and which on Christmas is something as a parent you really do want to hear. The last thing I would say, and I'm happy to answer all kinds of questions, I fell so in love with this organization that when the founder, who was a very persuasive, dynamic young woman who wanted to join the Peace Corps after high school, and when they wouldn't let her because she wasn't qualified for the Peace Corps, determined then and there that someday she would create that opportunity. Stanford undergraduate, Harvard MBA, all with the design to build this program. And she is a force of nature. She asked me to join the board, and shortly thereafter they asked me to serve as the chairman of the board. And it's really an honor for me because I think this is absolutely critical. We need a generation of young kids who understand the world. Yep. And who can react to things unfolding in our case it's international. I think it's true for the domestic programs as well. We need engaged citizens, and that's where the Global Citizen Year comes, which is helping kids understand their role as leaders and our role as a nation in our civic responsibilities. Final thing I'd say is that Global Citizen Year provides full scholarships for 30% of the kids that go, partial scholarships for 30% of the kids, and about 30% pay full freight. Which means our job as a board is really hard. We have to raise a lot of money to support this, but we're absolutely committed to diversity, not having this be something just for the elite kids to go and have an interesting vacation to write about to get into the next school they want to get into. This is about creating transformative life experiences and trusting the kids to do what they want, but creating that environment where there's both freedom and structure. So I really encourage you. I'm happy. I've got some information. I'm happy to give you further about Global Citizen Year. But as a parent of CRLS, because I guess I keep saying one more thing. CRLS is a fantastic training ground for this. So when some parents have sent their kids abroad, they're like, "Aren't you worried about getting mugged on the street or public transportation?" It's like, no, our kids here, you're street smart. You know how to handle yourselves, and you would be surprised when you get the kids from, Cincinnati or Wisconsin who show up and they're kind of clueless about how to take care of themselves. You all have street smarts and understanding that I think make it a lot easier to navigate a big and complicated world with a degree of confidence that many other kids don't. So that's a huge advantage going in. And so I'd encourage you to, take the plunge, or at least take the opportunity seriously, because I highly doubt you'll regret it. In fact, I think it will be an investment with infinite returns. Thank you.
Well, I'm about to let the air out of the balloon, I think. So I should start off by saying that I live in Needham, and I was worried about driving in tonight and where I was going to park my car. So let's start with that. And the second thing is, the last time I spoke about a gap year, it was to the anti-Cambridge. It was in La Jolla, California. So I'm feeling this sort of weird vibe, and I want to make sure we begin by, or at least I begin by pointing out that I may be coming at this from a slightly different place. I think, let me ask this question actually, because I was counting up, there are probably about 35 adults here. It's always great to see kids who actually come to these things, because parents go home and tell your children about what you heard, and well, we know how 17 and 18-year-olds react to that kind of information. So how many people in this room are advocates, perhaps ignorant ones, but advocates nonetheless of a gap year? Would you raise your hands? So, the problem is I'm kind of speaking to the choir here. Mm-hmm. That does pose a kind of issue. Because I've been talking about a gap year for, let's see, I wrote a book about this in 1989, so it's been a long time. And I think I have to stand up too, I don't do sitting very well. So, a lot of things have been said, but let me sort of go to the beginning and see if that will help. Normative education, that's what this school does, that's what every school I've ever had anything to do with does. It starts you at freshman year, you graduate after your senior year, and in theory, you go to college. And you get that high school diploma. It's like a driver's license, unfortunately. It doesn't actually say you can drive. It just says you've done some things that theoretically prove you can drive. And it also doesn't say, okay, now college is there for you and we've prepared you for it, because not necessarily. Especially not, I started talking about this in 1990. So let me tell you, in 2014, there is no way that you are prepared for college with all the social nuances, etc., that it may pose for you when you graduate from high school, even this high school. So why do you do a gap year? Because it is a gap, because it is a pause. And if anyone in this room can even remember this, the pause that refreshes, which was, after all, a perfectly reasonable saying when it existed, and it is in this context too. Because you're taking a break from one kind of education, and there's been ample evidence tonight to get the other kind. I think Alan used the word experiential, and that to me is that is the key word of this whole business. You are experiencing a kind of education that in my best day in the classroom I could not emulate.
Right.
What you're getting when you're on the street, whether it's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, or God help you, La Jolla, California, or any other location around the world, is an experience with people in a way that you have not experienced it, because you don't know the language, because you don't know what the culture is like. And yes, the ideal experience, frankly, in this context, would be what I call sheep dip immersion. Push them out of an airplane, they parachute down, hopefully it opens, and, you know, and then they're in a place, and it ain't the place they came from.
Yeah.
And they have to figure out what to do with that. Now, obviously, we don't want to subject our children to quite that significant a change. But there are lots of programs that allow kids to do that. You went on one of those, and it's still around. AFS is still chugging along. I started reviewing my, rather ancient notes for this. Great thing about computers is that stuff just sits there. And I found this program called Cultural Homestay International, which probably no one in this room has ever heard of, and I'd actually forgotten about, which does exactly the same thing at very low cost. I mean, they're basically designed, as are many of these options, to help you have this kind of experience. I mean, that's the whole purpose of this. Okay, so, quickly, what's wrong with doing this? Students will not ever go back to school, by the way. I see it.
That's what my mom said.
That's what your mom said, right. I mean, my mom said a lot of things like that, but not that one, because this option, I'm having a 50th college reunion this year, believe me, it didn't even exist then. But the fact is, yes, they won't go back to school for a year. When I wrote my book about this, Fred Hargadon was then the Dean of Admissions at Princeton, and he had been through, that was his third college iteration. He was at Stanford before that and Swarthmore before that, and in every one of those schools, he was a fierce advocate of the gap year. Just as Bill Fitzsimmons is, by the way, and that's why there's a checkbox on the Harvard application, and if you Google it, you will find a nice article he's written about a gap year, which is quite informative, and I would urge you to see it if you have not. But the fact is, as Fred said, what idiot would give up a 4-year sabbatical? Because that's what college is. How many of you in this room, for example, would not perfectly happily have that experience again? Oh, of course you would. On the other hand, as adults, if I could say to you like that, you could take a year off and it would mean nothing, and you could return to your experience a year later and start up just as if it had stopped the day before? Would you not do that? That's what a gap year is. It doesn't count, right? Because you're going to college with a whole bunch of other freshmen. And in 2014, age is not relevant. People are entering college at all kinds of ages. So in fact, when you start, that's a fine time to do that. I want to get to two other things. First of all, the notion of the scary part, the unstructured part. And I think there was probably one point at which in my sort of journey through this whole gap year thing, I would say, oh my God, I don't even listen to you two. Don't tell people it should be unstructured. That's a terrible thing. Well, in fact, it isn't a terrible thing because you've worked it out. Not everybody can do that, though. So one of the reasons why lots of programs exist, and even people on the dark side like me, is because kids need structure sometimes. They need more, and sometimes they need less. And you guys are perfect examples of people who have needed none, and that's great. Because when you look back on this year, and here's the other thing, it will be a life-changing experience. It makes doing this very easy, because you know, I do college advising, and I have people, as I'm sure all of you know, who are going to be calling me on the phone in the next 2 days and telling me bad news as well as good news. Well, this is all good news. Because when you come back, you've spent a year doing something that you have never done before. You've gotten out, you've gotten off the train, and that train starts in preschool, and it goes to graduate school or whenever. Well, it's not an express train, it's a local. You can get off it, and you should get off it. However, there's another factor of this that makes a difference, and that is that when you take that gap year, you are taking responsibility for your life, right? Your life. Not your parents taking it, you've taken it. Important. Because you learn something, that's a huge lesson, as any of you who are, well, if you remember being adolescents, and certainly you who have adolescents, being able to plan, notice there, by the way, are no young males up here, which, by the way, is also a comment about this. They're usually the ones who need young,
We heard you.
I meant young.
I think Stace.
Just the old men.
I think that's actually a telling fact, because it is indeed mostly young males who need this experience. Oh, yeah.
We're all thinking it.
That's because you are far more developmentally mature than I am, probably right now. And the fact is, therefore, you know what I didn't know when I was 17. I didn't have the good sense to think about doing this. And that's why I hope all of you who have male children are going to go home and I hope be able to impart this message. And why, if you're here in this audience, guys, listen to me, this is valuable. Trust me. But you may need a little help. That's another part of this, because the idea of going through free fall, which what you two guys did, may be a little harder for them. Because free fall just gets them to tomorrow. And that's they need a little more planning. And planning is also at the key to all of this. I want to go somewhere else for a minute too. And that is to say that there are lots of options out there now that supplant the idea of a gap year by imposing that option earlier on in high school. And there are now, I counted them up today, 17 junior year options, which take you away either for a semester or a year, both in the United States and elsewhere. And if you know anyone who's ever done the mountain school, for example, which is the most obvious and the one most of us know about, or city term, the island school, Chewonki, you probably know that if you've spoken to alumni from those programs, they say, oh my God, it was the best experience of my life. It was a life-changing experience. Well, guess what? same principles apply. So don't overlook those. I mean, they keep you in high school, many of them have scholarship money, they are worth your consideration, and they are worth imposing on this high school. I don't have any idea what the policy is here, but believe me, those programs are worth that investment. The last thing that I want to say, because I think I have about 1 minute left, is that if the college news does not go as hoped, there is also the other way in which I tend to see people who are doing a gap year, and that is as a gap year with reapplication to college. And while that is a very logical process, it has only two fundamental parts on the positive side and one serious one on the negative side, and you need to know what those are. On the positive side, well, maybe positive, colleges will see the spring of senior year, which they do not for any other applicant. And that means they get the totality of your high school. Yeah, exactly. There's a possible negative there.
There's a thought.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm telling you this in March, not January. But if there's a way to salvage it's certainly worth it because that gives admissions officers more information, and it's valuable. The second thing is that if testing has gone awry, if there hasn't been time to take everything, if you haven't taken the ACT, which I'm a huge advocate of, then basically it's time to do that. Those are the positives. So you can, in a way, retool the data points of your life and then do a gap year, value on both sides. The negative is that many colleges, and this is an increasing number every year, there seems to be one or two more, are not happy about your doing what you are very likely to do, and that is defer from college X and then apply to colleges Y and Z or whatever in the following year. It's very difficult to, in the face of a few college acceptances, basically say, well, gosh, I don't think I want these. Put them away and then reapply. Most people want to accept, defer, and then do the gap year and apply from the gap year. And Wesleyan, Colby, Hamilton, among others, will tell you you can't. Connecticut College. The list kind of rolls around in my head. So that's, if you choose to do this, you better do your homework.
In other words, you can accept and defer it, but you can't not get out, you can't get out of it after you've done it.
Yeah, I mean, I could.
It sounds like they want to, if I accepted at Tufts and then I apply to Wesleyan, Wesleyan will not.
No, if you accepted at Tufts and applied to Wesleyan, Tufts could care less. But if you accepted Wesleyan and applied to Tufts, Wesleyan cares.
Oh.
But now, I can go rogue here and say, nobody knows about this except, it's a moral obligation, not a legal one, but nonetheless, it is a moral obligation and therefore important. So, my point is simply, it's a more complicated process than it may seem, so you need to be careful about thinking about that. Okay?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I am just amazed by the range we have, although I will say what we tried deliberately to do, which hopefully is obvious, we wanted 2 students who did something unstructured and then 2 who did it with a specific program so that people here would get a sense of the range of possibilities for a bridge year. The other thing I wanted to point out is Teen Life. Right? So Teen Life is someone who's just a resource for a gap year. If you want to do 20 seconds.
Like many of the adults in this room, I also did a gap year and started a company when my kids were in middle school to basically curate all these great enrichment opportunities for teens. So some of the things Bob was speaking about, so the semester programs or the school year abroad. So our website is the largest online directory. We have about 15,000 opportunities for teens, and most of them are summer programs. So we have especially good, strong pre-college summer programs. That's another thing we should look at. There are lots of travel-related summer programs or academic summer programs that take your kids and teach them things that they've never had experience with, perhaps. Language and so forth. There's also a lot of community service opportunities. We have a really great resource for that. We actually go out and ask nonprofits in the greater Boston area and elsewhere if they would like volunteers for a team. And so we only add them if they say yes. And
Do you have material or?
Yeah, I have some material, but I just wanted to say it's a free resource. You don't have to register, you don't have to log in. We have a number of, in addition to the listings, we have digital guides. We don't print them anymore, but I have a few here from 2012, but all of these exist. We have 2013 and 2014. And we also have a blog which talks about gap year. So please feel free to use that.
What's it called?
What's the site?
teenlife.com. We'll be yeah. So we're going to do a better job marketing this. We're really busy.
Right, excellent, thank you. And we're talking to you.
Marie Schwartz.
Okay, thank you, Marie. I would like to just open it up. Any person here has a question, if it's to a specific person, please direct it. If it's not, then we'll just have whoever wants to answer it. Holly.
So I've taped this so that any child from the school or elsewhere who wants to find out more can look at it afterwards. Do I have permission from everybody here to put it on YouTube?
Yes.
Yeah, I have to talk to my agent, but
Oh,
I think that's okay.
okay, thank you.
How will they be able to
Alan,
find
are
it?
you comfortable with?
I'm going to give Patty the link. It'll be on YouTube and I'll give her the name of it.
Okay. Ooh, well, you are literally, okay. So, and just raise your hand and I'll,
Patty, I just want to say, I was fascinated by your structure of how you do this with the 30, 30, 30 to try to bring the diversity in.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things, well, my daughter's Maya who spoke here, and one of the things that, you know, that City Year does as well, which I wanted to talk about because people may not be aware of it, is that they offer a stipend because they are part of AmeriCorps. They were sort of the progenitor of AmeriCorps. And so not only will she have this experience, but it's open to so many kids because they pay them a very good stipend that allows them even to live on their own in the community. And then they get a college scholarship at the end of it. So they're able to build in that same diversity that you're talking about. So it's not just something like a unpaid internship, you know, which is so famous these days.
Could I piggyback on that?
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's important to realize that AmeriCorps is an umbrella that includes 3 programs, one of which is City Year.
Yeah.
The other 2 are the old, what were the old Vista Block programs, actually, and then the third one is NCCC, which is now, I think, National Civilian Conservation Corps. The latter 2 programs are year-long, but they tend to be residential. They provide, therefore, an experience that actually is totally cost-free. The stipend that City Year provides is often inconsiderable when it comes to living in a city. So I think if you're looking for,
but you don't have to pay to do it,
basically,
which is
you
already
don't,
a
right.
good
But if
thing.
you're looking for something that's essentially going to give you that community experience, but do it essentially cost-free, I think the other 2 aspects of AmeriCorps are probably a bit more helpful in that regard.
But one index of this generation's interest and the lack of opportunity is that AmeriCorps has about 75,000 Corps members a year, and we get close to 500,000 applications a year.
That's it.
And that's the case with Teach for America and with other service programs.
Right, so actually the other thing when you were talking, Alan, I want to say, whenever I hear something like this, I think, wouldn't it be nice if we did compulsory service so everybody had to either be in the military or
Bill
do
Clinton wanted to do
some
it,
kind
but
of-
he
right.
couldn't get anybody to listen to him.
Anyway,
Hi, I am the mom of a 17-year-old male who is super mature. He knows act. Totally not. He would object. But he is 17 and he just turned 17. And I'm just wondering if there's any age issues with any of the programs.
There actually are some. I mean, there are, it's interesting, you made the remark about being too young or not being a college student. And I think that can be an issue. I mean, academic programs tend to be quite rigid about accepting people who have enrolled in university, and that's often a stipulation. So that's a problem. There are a few that don't. They're bizarre. One would be, for example, the University of Nevada at Reno, as I said, which has actually wonderful language programs around the country. It gives full college credit, blah, 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 but it will take pre-matriculants, but that's exceptional. I think the more alternative the program, the more likely it is, the less tied to any organization. There's less likely to be an age issue. And Knowles, for example, could care less. They'll take you at 17 or 18. So.
You know, I can actually answer some of that, because AFS, the American Field Service, which is the program I went on, has changed somewhat and developed over time. It was actually started in World War II with a specific goal of providing cross-cultural and intercultural relations after the World Wars had shown us that we really need more people to be in contact with each other. They actually have some programs. I looked into it for our 17-week from 18-year-old son who's considering a gap year, and he was actually too old for some of them. So that, and they have some programs that are like what I did, which is you stay in a family, you go to a local school. They also have some, they have morphed into having some programs that are more volunteer programs, that you will be assigned to a community, but you'll work with a local nonprofit organization, and you might live, if you're a little bit older, you might live on your own. So I would look into that, and probably Team Life has some of these maybe gathered all together on the website.
Yeah, no one's mentioned PG programs at boarding schools. So if your son needs a lot more structure before he goes to college, a boarding school is an intermediate option.
Yeah, actually, I meant to comment on that. Thank you, Marie. That's actually an interesting question. I have to confess, violently opposed to postgraduate programs. So it's a good time for me to jump into this and explain why. I think that there are I actually put something on that handout about the list of them. I think there are 170 schools now that are offering 13th year. The problem is that in many ways, the 13th year programs are anachronisms. I mean, we live in an age in which students apply to college early, and if you're going to apply, and some huge percentage of students are doing this, 60 or 70% actually of the population at more selective schools are applying early decision or early action or rolling or whatever. If you go to a PG school for two reasons. One is because you want structure, you want to have that maturing experience, and the second is because you are trying to improve yourself in a particular area, and those would be fall and winter sports. If you're going to lacrosse or baseball, give it up because they're over by the time you get into college. So, so the thing is, if you're doing it for sports, that makes sense. If you're doing it for academics, it doesn't, because you will be applying to college before your grades actually show up anywhere. And I taught at Exeter, which is a school that takes, 200 postgraduates every year, and we didn't have a grade registered until the middle of until Christmas time, basically, so that doesn't really work. The other problem, and to me the bigger problem as someone who spent a good percentage of his life living in boarding schools and running dormitories, is that if I'm a high school graduate, right? High school graduate, there you are. So here I am, I'm a to-be high school graduate, and I'm going to suddenly be plopped into a situation in which I am surrounded by social restrictions. Indeed, at most PG schools, if you look at that list carefully, you will note that they work on what is called a one-strike policy, which means you do anything wrong and you're out. So that's a $50,000 investment that is going down the drain. So I think very carefully about postgraduates.
What I have heard, though, is that for some students, particularly who may need 5 years to get through high school, why we say they all have to get through in 4 years, if they have some learning issues or they just learn differently, that year might actually be a lifesaver, and having a different environment may be positive. So,
yeah.
Okay. Wait, actually, and then.
Yeah, so I have a question about internships, like how to get an internship